As we tape this on Friday, the government shutdown shows no sign of ending, with both sides digging in as this drags into its third week. I had a chance to speak to CBS News' Ed O'Keefe in Washington. Ed, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jim. Good to be with you.
So we're taping this on Friday, and give me a sense of where you see this playing out over the next few days, or are we looking at weeks?
We're definitely looking at days, and I think the ultimate length of this now pretty much rests with the president, because we've seen these reports that he is seriously considering now taking action on his own by declaring a national emergency and then tapping into some money that essentially is available through military construction and infrastructure projects to somehow address this issue. He has pointed out, others point out correctly, that presidents have declared national emergencies at all sorts of different times and for different reasons. Perhaps the most notable, more modern one is after 9/11, when George W. Bush did it. But if he does that, I think you'll see this argument start to shift away from Capitol Hill and instead to the courts, where there may very well be some kind of a challenge to whether his decision to do this and to use the money that he's trying to get at is constitutional, or actually dabbles into work that Congress is usually supposed to do in determining how money is spent to build that kind of a wall. But one of the more remarkable things of the last few days, I think, Jim, and maybe it's just because they now feel more emboldened with control of the House, is the near unanimity, I think complete unanimity, among Democrats here in Washington to stand opposed to the president in granting this request. While everyone says they'd like to see the government reopened and would like to have seen it opened, yesterday, or to have never been partially shut down at all, the fact that you're seeing more concern, more hand-wringing among Republicans about this situation than Democrats signals that Democrats at least believe they're in the right and that the country stands with them in opposition and concern about building some kind of a wall.
Well, is this just further proof that we have two sides who are continuing to play to their base? The 2018 election was a base election. We're now seeing governance in 2019 being base governance. Is that any way that you can actually end up running a country if the Democrats are going to stay to their left and the Republicans are going to stay in lockstep with the president?
Well, I think a lot of Democrats would point out that it's not just Democrats who are opposed to this, but a fair number of independents as well. And it was independents that helped them win a lot of those races that gave them the House majority, after all. So, but yes, divided government in an era of base politics is something we haven't seen before. And the early days of it suggest total stalemate. So if and when we get off of this issue and move on to other things, it will be interesting to see whether the two sides remain at loggerheads or are ever able to find any sense of compromise.
You know, you look at this and you realize that the president sort of painted himself into a corner that he's having trouble getting out of. You referenced earlier the national emergency may be his only off-ramp in this, so that he gets a chance to actually say that he fought the fight, didn't give in to Democrats, fought for the wall, went to the courts, and if the courts end up having to, sign an executive order, and then if the courts end up stymieing him, he can rail against liberal Democratic judges once again.
Exactly, yeah. If he insists on getting 5.6, 5.7 billion or bust, then really his only other outlet for this is by taking steps on his own, which will almost certainly be challenged in court by, if not House Democrats, then other groups or perhaps some states who might find a way to step in and find some reason that they believe they can challenge this. Of course, the way all sides could get out of this is to compromise. The first potential compromise is on the table. Democrats say, look, there's about $1 billion in change that we and Republicans had negotiated that could be spent on border security. The president says, no, I want 5.7 billion. Well, nobody has suggested or come up with a figure that's somewhere in between that, just like in a normal negotiation or bartering situation. And because they refuse to take that next step for fear of alienating their base or being seen as weak and capitulating to the situation, then, we will remain at a standoff.
Well, last question. The invoking of a national emergency, this could raise a whole number of interesting issues that I think even some on the right, some conservatives, are worried about if the president goes this route, because it would open the door for future presidents, potentially Democratic presidents, from using that same power to perhaps deal with issues like climate change or assault weapons, or a lot of things that again, Republicans often railed against Obama's use of executive orders. This is executive order use on steroids.
Totally. And if they don't speak out against it, I think then their Democratic opponents would point out that they're being a bit hypocritical by standing by the president when they do this. But I think even separate of the constitutional concern of an executive overreaching potentially, the political reality for a lot of these Republicans who represent parts of the country where Trump is popular is going to start setting in starting next week. Because it's important to remember, and I think most Americans have been reminded of this now in the last week or so, 85% of the federal workforce lives and works far outside the nation's capital, in places like South Florida, Atlanta, Denver, Dallas, Seattle, Philadelphia, Boston, vast sections of the Midwest, the state of West Virginia, massive federal facilities, regional offices, research laboratories, and other locations that have been furloughed or where people are working furloughed or working without pay, and it's a reality that's going to affect the local economies and eventually affect local politics. And I suspect that may have just as much bearing on this as whether or not there are concerns about the president taking steps on his own. So, still, I think several days to go, maybe weeks, but it'd be interesting to see how Republican support for the president holds in the coming days if he continues to hold so firmly.
Well, Mitch McConnell's his best friend right now. Ed O'Keefe, thank you very much for your time.
Yes.
All right. Up next, DeSantis makes some big moves on the state's environmental policy. We'll discuss that and what it means for the Everglades when we come back.